That would mean that it would diminish morality.
Of course it would.
That's the debate. That's the end of the debate.
That's not the end of the debate.
Yes, it is. The prompt. Read the speakeasy. Pull up the prompt.
A meaningless universe does not diminish morality. So the idea that the universe came from nothing doesn't diminish morality.
It would necessarily have to.
I mean, I love to do devil's advocate, but I would have to agree. If we change the term to say that a universe that came from nothing doesn't diminish morality, that's a little different. The term meaningless itself would negate the idea.
Sure. Okay, yeah, I guess, yeah. My bias got into that prompts for sure. Okay, so a universe that comes from nothing. What about that?
I would say that you could still have morality. I would say that it wouldn't negate morality.
But the morality would have to be subjective at that point.
It's true, but still be morality. I would still say, we can debate it if you want.
All right.
Okay, you're affirmative, so you roll.
Yeah, so here's my argument. It's very simple. So if there is no intention behind the creation of the universe, then there's no universal mind to ground any universal concepts, and morality would basically boil down to a subjective set of preferences. Well, I prefer this, you prefer that. And then I would ultimately just boil down to force doctrine for what our morality is, but that would just be a set of social preferences. However, morality has to point to a good or an evil, an ultimate good or evil, evil being the deprivation of the good.
I would think that what we would assume with the term morality, of course, in this sense, if there wasn't an ultimate creator, we would say that there can't be a truth outside an objective truth, which would obviously be the case. And yet that term would still be necessary to signify some sort of truths, which you've acknowledged would be truths that would be subjective. And there's no reason that that wouldn't be a morality. You may say that that form of morality would be something that's nowhere near as meaningful as an objective morality, and it would be at the whims of the person that had it. And yet it would still be a form of morality.
I don't think it'd be a form of morality. I think it'd just be a form of preferences, and maybe they could say they could call it their form of morality or ethics, but ultimately it's just boiling down to I prefer this. But if you have to, but you're not appealing to anything outside of yourself, right? So how is that actually like? How could that even be a universal concept?
Sure, you could appeal to things outside yourself, and even if it was just appealing to yourself, it would still, the fact that it's subjective doesn't mean that it's not morality. I don't think that morality, the definition of it, are things that is good, right? I don't think that it needs.
Well, what does it mean to be moral?
I think it means to be good.
You think? Well, so how are we defining good?
Well, I would define good as something that would be subjective to me in this sense. Obviously, in the sense of what we have now, that there's an objective morality, I prefer that. But if there was no objective morality, I would still have a code of ethics and a way of acting within the world. Of course, it would be subjective, but it would still be a morality.
It wouldn't be a morality. It would just be your preference. It would just you have nothing to appeal to for what the good is. So it's just I prefer this. And
okay,
if I prefer versus you prefer, that's not morality. That's
let me ask you this. So why is morality in the objective sense important?
Morality would have to be in objective sense because it has to point to a good and an evil, right? Because that's what it is. Morality is what's moral is what's good, what's immoral is what's evil. How can you even have any kind of a standard for what we're appealing to for what is good or evil if we don't have a standard to appeal to that's objective? It's because just I prefer versus you prefer.
It might be the case. You may say that subjective morality is worthless, right? Is that something you would say?
Yeah, subjective morality makes no sense.
And yet
it's just saying my preference.
The mere fact that you just use the term proves that it can exist. You just don't think it's of value. So it exists.
No, it couldn't exist.
You said it. You said subjective morality. You just said it.
Now you're equivocating. Just because I'm
using.
Well, it is equivocation because you're saying that because I say the word, therefore it exists. Okay, got it then. Leflipidoo.
It's not just that you said it exists. It's you acknowledge by the mere saying it that if I said, well, my morality is X, that you understand what I'm talking about. A set of preferences that I think are good. And you might say, but how do you define what good is? And I would say, well, it is subjective. For example, I could say without an objective morality, I say good is a utilitarian calculus. What I subjectively believe is of benefit to society, to the average members of society. Now, that's a form of morality. It is remarkably inferior to an objective morality, and yet it is a morality, particularly if there is no objective morality. We would still need frameworks that people would try to come up, or rather need's not the right word. People would still come up with frameworks to which they thought something was good and not good. For example, it might be something as simple as it's good to eat because I feel better and I feel worse when I don't eat and I'm starving, right?
Okay, but why should you eat?
Well, I should eat because it makes me feel good.
But why should you feel good?
Because it's my preference to do so.
Okay, so why should we listen to your preferences over my preference?
You don't have to, and yet that's my morality, and it exists.
Well, and that's not an ought claim, so it doesn't.
It doesn't matter if it's. What does that mean? It's not an ought
morality
claim.
is a set of ought claims. Morality, you should do what's good, right?
Sure.
But now you've just done a contradiction, because I just asked you, why should you eat, and you said it's because it makes me feel good. Well, why should you feel good? You said, well, I don't have to.
But it doesn't. I could have a set of morality of things that I should have as a code that I think is good and bad, that I could interpret good and bad as subjective. That doesn't mean that the code that I've developed that says that do things that are good and not things that are bad doesn't exist. It's just subjective. You might think
it wouldn't. No, it doesn't exist in objective reality. It would just be. It would literally be a social construction.
What might be, and yet it's still morality.
Well, no, it's not morality. Okay, is money morality? Because money is a social construction.
Money, what we
or
would
the law morality.
Not all things. No, it's a fallacy. Not everything that is a social construction would be morality in this sense.
No, I'm trying to ask you.
Okay, I could take this ad reductive if I want as well. I could say, well, if there was no creator, then nothing exists anyways, right?
No, if there was no creator, that wouldn't imply nothing exists. Things would still exist in material
How could
reality.
they exist if nothing created? If there's no ultimate truth, define existence.
It would depend. I would say so if I was trying to argue from your view, I would say existence would be material reality.
But you're not trying to argue from my view.
From my view, no. I would argue existence is a metaphysical concept that can only be grounded in the mind of God. So if there's no creator, then you can't have existence.
So there you have it. And so
wait, one second, Rob. If it's true that there is no ultimate objective creator, then nothing exists. Then subjective morality doesn't exist in a universe.
Sure, it exists to the extent that everything else exists.
Which it doesn't. So it doesn't exist.
That's not true, right?
The
prompt itself implies that there would still be existence, correct? Even though you're saying it's impossible.
We just reduced it to your position to.
That's not true. What's the prompt?
You just said that.
What's the prompt?
The prompt is that in a universe without a creator, morality would still exist, I think.
But you're saying, the mere fact that you're saying that a universe couldn't exist without a creator, correct?
A universe that comes from nothing does not diminish morality. But morality wouldn't be morality if you just agreed with me, though, that if existence is a metaphysical concept and there's no objective mind to ground existences, then nothing exists. And therefore, the morality doesn't exist.
Let's do it real simple. Can a universe exist without a creator?
No.
So then, in the confines of this hypothetical question we're having, that is an impossible scenario. You acknowledge that, right?
It's logically impossible, yes.
Okay, so if we are still debating within that framework, then in this logical impossibility, you would have to concede that once we accept for the purposes of this discussion that we are accepting this impossibility has to occur for the debate to happen, why couldn't morality exist in a subjective framework?
Well, if we're agreeing that the hypothetical is logically impossible, I don't have to grant it.
Well, again, I don't think that it is hypothetically impossible, if for the purposes of this discussion.
Well, from my view and your view as a Christian, it's logically impossible for there to be a universe without a creator behind it.
But yet we argue as if it would be the equivalent of saying that there are logical impossibilities that we could see, but you could still debate the hypothetical of them if they existed.
Well, no, you couldn't, because I would just have to I could just ask you within from your view, would morality still exist if God didn't exist? You can't envision that because you don't.
Sure,
you can't envision that because it's a logical impossibility from your view for God not to exist.
Sure, could good and evil exist? Could the concept of good and evil exist without God?
No, not the concept. No, I'm talking about the thing that we're pointing to. The actual good. Could good exist absent a God?
Well, the concept can exist, and my belief in what I think is good is exist. It's subjective. It's not objective. The utility of it, when we could compare it to a world where there is an objective truth, is obviously inferior to the point of being worthless. My subjective view on what's good is worthless in our world because there is objective truth. So my subjective view of truth is irrelevant, right? But in a world where there is no objective truth, there would still be utility in having morality. There would still be people that would inevitably say, this is good and this is bad.
Would that always be true? Wait, hold on. In a universe where there is no objective truth, Would it always be true that it would be good to have a set of morality?
The question of good in this example would again be subjective. So the
I'll just
question
grant
you're
that it's
asking, so the mere language you're using right now would trend to, you're trying to get me to say that if I make an always claim that that's a universal truth, but that's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that subjectively, I will continue to act as if some things are preferable and some things aren't. And I will deem that my code of morality.
Well, hold on. No, what I'm asking is, from the view where there is no standard for, where there is no objective truth whatsoever, then we couldn't say anything exists. Nothing would exist because it has to maintain its identity over time. If it doesn't maintain its identity over time, because there's no laws of logic, because there's no actual objective truth there, then all logic goes out the window.
No.
So no, identity over time.
Even if that's true, even if logic goes out
from
the
your
window,
view, in your world, contradictions could exist. You could literally have P and not P because nothing exists.
could be hypothetically could be true, although I think that the obvious example that we're giving, or the obvious topic that we've been given, applies that there's some sort of universe that exists that's not completely nonsensical, right? And in that, like, for example, if you could hypothetically think for a moment that God didn't create us and we came from something like a Big Bang, in that world, if it was possible, would people develop systems of morality? Yes. They would. It would be subjective morality.
Would they develop a system of preferences? Sure, I'll just grant that they would develop a system of preferences.
Would they develop things that they called good and bad?
I don't even think they would. No, I don't think they could, because they wouldn't have a standard for good and bad.
No, that's not true. Like, for example, there are people that say things are good and bad right now, and they don't have a standard for it, correct? And yet they still say...
Yeah, and that's why we debate that. That's why we debate them. Correct. Say, you have no standard for good and bad, so what you're saying makes no sense.
And yet they still claim, right? You just
like
said they would never.
Dolphins are doing backflips behind
right,
you,
but
that doesn't mean anything.
But the argument you just made there is they would never make that claim because they wouldn't have
they
a
wouldn't
reference.
make the claim. I was saying what the
right.
what the
and
reference
so
they're talking about doesn't exist, because
so they would
exist without the standard for
they would say
truth.
good and bad. They would say morality. It would just be subjective. It would be a subjective morality.
Well, the only way for that to even work would they would still have to have the laws of logic.
Perhaps so, but I think it's
how can they have the laws of logic without an objective truth, like a God that created an objective universal line?
I think that Again, what you go back to is that the scenario outlined in the question itself is impossible, and it's a way of avoiding the debate. It is clear that the topic set forth is implying that there would be a world or a universe that existed without a creator. Like, this would be no different than sort of...
I can't even imagine what that would be. Like,
well, you may not... I think that it's easy to imagine, right?
I don't think it's easy to imagine.
I think it's easy to imagine, at least in this sense, if it existed, if there were human beings in that world, right, and we just weren't created, that they would come up with codes. They would come up with codes of morality.
Well, in the world where there's no creator and there's no God and there's no objective truth, what's a human? There would be no universals whatsoever in the world. They would be particulars.
Again, what we're saying is it would be hypothetically their possibility outlined through the hypothetical scenario. What you're doing is saying, like, this is something that someone that is incapable of looking into hypotheticals, maybe the sign of someone low IQ. I'm just fucking with you. I'm just fucking with you there. But what you say is, you're like, well, the hypothetical's not possible. This would be no different if I said, imagine if you didn't have breakfast this morning and you said, I can't do that because that didn't happen.
Breakfast this morning, Rob.
Right. But if you see the point, you would say, but I can't because it happened. Right? What we're saying is, if we accept the hypothetical, and so it's part of the agreement of having this debate, we have to accept that the hypothetical is a possibility. So if there is a universe that exists without a creator, in that hypothetical, would there be people that would come up with systems of good and bad? Yes,
there would be no standard for morality. There'd be no standard.
It would be subjective. I concede.
There would be no standard. A standard would be universal. There's nothing.
It would be subjective. I concede, and yet it still exists.
Everything would be subjective. There would be no category as humans. They would be individual particulars only.
Nonetheless, it would be subjective, but the concept of morality...
There would be no such thing as... You couldn't say rock and point to a universal category of rock. You'd be pointing to that thing in particular right there. That's rock number 4758.
Look, again, not necessarily true, right? So you are right that, like, in order for things to exist, this goes back to saying that the hypothetical is impossible. But if hypothetically we exist as we do today, right, and there wasn't, the Big Bang is theoretically correct, and there wasn't a creator, the rock, we could point to the rock. We have an acceptance of what we all agree the rock is, or at least with the majority.
That would mean that there wouldn't be a universal category called rock, because there'd be no standard to appeal to for what truth is.
That might not.
You could say that, and yet we would operate as if that wasn't the case.
We would still, even if you would say,
well, what are we appealing to for objective truth for the universal?
It's subjective. Yeah, that's the point. It wouldn't
that we couldn't have a discussion.
That's
we wouldn't be able to have a
not
discussion
true. That's not true. We would appeal subjectively. Can you have a discussion right now with people that have a subjective morality?
Yes, but that's because we exist in a world with objective truth and objective morality. That's the only reason.
But again, you've already conceded that subjective morality exists even in that comment.
No. They claim that morality is subjective. I don't grant that morality is subjective when I have those debates.
It is not subjective. Morality, as we know it, is not subjective. But if there was no objective morality, morality as a concept of what is good and bad would still exist. It would just be worthless in the sense that it would be subjective. It would still have...
So it would be worthless. That would mean that it would diminish morality.
Of course, it would.
That's the debate. That's the end of the debate.
That's not the end of the debate.
Yes, it is. The prompt. Read the speakeasy. Pull up the prompt.
Unless I misread the prompt, the concept of morality would still exist, even if the utility of it would be diminished.
Yeah, but that's the prompt. It would not diminish reality. It would not diminish reality.
Shit! The universe that comes from nothing does not diminish. Yeah, fuck. Yeah, it's certainly. I misinterpreted what the prompt was. Yeah, sure, it would diminish morality as a concept, but it would still. Let me put it this way: it would diminish the utility of morality amongst individuals, but it wouldn't diminish morality as far as the utility of still believing that something was a good and a bad. So if we look at it in a subjective sense, it wouldn't diminish it. For example, it is without a doubt. It is, if we accept that it has to be a hypothetical that we could look at, that we could exist without a creator, we will as individuals say this is preferable, this is good, and this is bad.
Why would we say that?
Because we have to in order to exist. You have to. People, it's human nature. Just like an animal without consciousness, I don't want to say without consciousness, without a concept of things like morality says, I like when I'm eating, I like when I'm drinking, I like when I'm not.
That would mean it's good. That would mean it's good.
It doesn't matter. They operate, it is good to them. Good is in the sense is this is something that I prefer.
Yes, but you just conceded that it would diminish the morality of everything. It would diminish it because there's no standard.
It diminishes the morality when it comes to the concept of sort of a universal truth, but it doesn't diminish it at the individual level of subjective level.
Well, let me ask you something, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
If, let's say two secularists are arguing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say a secularist and a Christian are arguing over morality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does the secularists have to concede that from their view, all morality is just what they prefer?
Do they have to concede?
Like, in order for them to be consistent, wouldn't they have to concede that? Because they don't have an objective set of morality, right?
Yes, I will say yes. They would argue no, but I would say yes. If
their view is that all morality is a set of preferences, and from their view as well, that nobody's preference is above anybody else's preference because all preferences are equally valid, then that would diminish anybody's claim to what is right or wrong to literally just a particular of just them.
Yes. I don't disagree with this.
So that would diminish morality in a world without a creator.
But I think that it's clear that what the prompt is asking is the concept of morality, the concept of right and wrong. If there is no universal truth, is there utility in subjective truth in order for you to survive?
There might be utility in it, but I would just ask, why do you need to survive?
But let's start with the thing.
If you have no ought or reason for why you should survive, then any claim that you make to survival for utility is.
Do non-Christians have an ought to why they should survive?
Non-Christians?
Yes.
They couldn't ground it in anything. They would just
okay, but they may not be able to ground, but do they have utility?
Does it have maybe from their view?
Look, do you think that, like, for example, animals, do you believe that animals enter into heaven?
No.
They're conscious.
They don't have a soul from my view.
Okay, but they're conscious, correct?
Yeah, they're conscious.
Do you think that animals, like, let's say a dog, right? We'll just,
does a dog in and of itself get utility out of, like, continuing to eat?
The question I have is there utility for the dog because we assume the mere fact that it's eating and stuff proves that there's something inherent in it that it wants to live, correct?
Well, I mean,
because it's not just taking
utility in it. Hold on, I wouldn't even grant that there's utility in it, and here's why. Because utility you'd have to have a standard for what utility even is.
Well, the utility, okay, let's let's say this utility, I guess if you take umbrage with the word, it is not as if creatures that we consider living that aren't humans are making total random choices that the dog might decide to eat. It might decide not to eat. And it's always a flip of the coin, every single action. There are actions it's taking for the self-sustaining, right?
Well, yes, but you're saying the utility would be in preserving its life. But if you have no standard for what is good at all, then you couldn't actually say that there's utility in it, because utility would imply there's benefit. But if there's no standard for what benefit is, and there's no standard for good, then it would diminish morality.
Don't use the word utility. There is something inherent, whether for whatever reason, that the dog is taking actions to live, correct?
Yeah, I would just grant that the dog.
So as a human, if we assume that humans would have the same thing, right? In order to continue to take those actions, we're going to have, because humans have consciousness.
Well, without a creator, there's no actual distinction between a human and a dog, other than the human's brain is more developed. That's the only distinction.
That might be true. That might be true. And yet,
so in this type, there's utility in it.
Again, you keep going, and yet you keep going back to the word utility, which I'm saying is not necessary. What I'm saying is that if we accept that the dog takes these actions in order to sustain its life, humans would do the same. And humans would want a concept of what is good for them and what is bad, because they have a higher level of consciousness, which means that it would be equally important for them to develop a code of what is good and what's bad in order to sustain their life. So in that concept, in the subjective way, if there was no objective morality, morality would be just as important to the individual.
I'll let it get to 20 minutes and 30 seconds, see if we have a solo judge.
Well, no, even if it's the case that humans are more...
Never mind, we do have a solo judge. Never mind. We do have a solo judge. You can finish off what you're doing there for a second, because I have to plug my...
Even if the humans have a survival mechanism, right? There's no purpose to humans in this world without a god. There's no telos to them. So them benefiting is just their own self-preservation, but there's no benefit to any. There's no benefit to anything.
The concept, if we accept at that point, the self-preservation would itself be what is driving people, just like it's driving animals that we say don't really have a soul or go into the kingdom of heaven. And the concept of morality would be necessary for that to proceed. So it would not be diminished.
Hold on, this is Hume's guillotine. You can't get it off from it is. So because it is the case that humans have a self-preservation, instinct, that doesn't you can't actually get any kind of an ought claim from that if they should try to preserve themselves.
It doesn't matter if the ought would exist. What matters is that the is does exist. And in order for the
ought, then it diminishes morality.
All right, hold up.
That's not true.
I want to see who Dogs is choosing for the solo judge.
Actually, thank you, Rob. Good job. But, I got to give it to Stillborn, because he actually did a really good job at defending himself through his ideas and everything.
I appreciate it, Dog. And Rob, that was so much fucking fun, dude. Guys, bring Rob back immediately.
Good. Oh, no. Don't bring me back. I got to go cover Venezuela. Listen, first off, huge fuck up on my point with diminish. I thought it doesn't exist. So that's a big matzo ball to fucking hang out there. Ultimately,
I'm just saying, I know what you do, bro, and I love you, Rob. Totally.
That was so much fun, Rob.
You're ultimately right.
Did a pretty good
Stillborn, you're ultimately
right.
You did great. Morality.
That was one of the best debates I've seen about counter morality that I've ever seen.
Did he win, Rob? Because he made a mistake.
What's
Did
that?
he win, Rob?
Rob still won that one.
No, I don't think I won. I think objectively.
No, I said, did he win?
Oh, yes.
Do you think he won?
Yes, I think that he's on the right side. I think he's on the right side of this issue, and I think that any chance that I had once that I fucked up and saw that the diminished part of the morality, there is no doubt, based on my argumentation, that morality, at the very least, would be less important or would have less value. There's no doubt. The entire first 3/4 of the debate, I was like, sure, it'd have less value, but it's still, that is the topic, so I fucked that one up.
But he did a good job. That's the only reason he got it.
But Rob, tell everybody in the chat where they can find you. I know you said you're gonna go do something, but if you want to come back, tell them why they gotta bring you back.
Oh, you should bring me back because, as we were talking earlier, objectively, you can't help but find me attractive, right? So that's the number one reason that you
Rob, you are the cutest guy in the panel.
So find me over at Normal America with Rob Noer on YouTube and Rob Noer and all other platforms. If I can, I'm probably not going to come back tonight, but if I could promote something real quick, please, on the 15th, right here on Speakeasy's channel, Speakeasy will be moderating a debate, and we're going to try to set this up every 2 weeks with a opponent that I don't know and a topic that I don't know. So Speakeasy will reach out to an opponent that will come up with a topic, we'll prepare it, and Speakeasy will know whether or not it's something that'll be good for me to disagree with or whatever. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait, and so I hope you'll all join. And good luck to you all tonight. It was a fucking blast as always. So thank you guys so much.